Greetings and salutations, fine people. I'm Manny Alvarez. Welcome to The Good Soul, a show where we'll have supercharged chats with everyday humans from all walks of life and unpack what in their story will inspire us all. We'll extract the untapped wisdom, distill it, and serve it up to you in all the right ways that will engage, enlighten, and most of all, inspire growth within your soul. I think people are awesome. So join me on this journey through the hearts and minds of ordinary people to uncover the good soul within you. This is The Good Soul. Welcome to The Good Soul. We are on episode 30, new decade. I know, I can't believe this. This week's episode is entitled Shaping Our Future, Caring for Our Kids. Really excited to have you on. This is Dr. Mike Ficenec, Michael, but I'm going to call you Mike, of course.
Please do.
I'm going to try to call you Dr. Mike.
Actually, because Ficenec is so hard to say, and parents will ask that when they meet me, how do we say your name? I usually tell them, most of the kids, and actually most of the parents call me Dr. Mike.
Dr. Mike. Okay. I happen to think Ficenec is a beautiful word that I love to say. Has anybody ever said that to you?
No.
It is such a nice, like, it feels good coming off my mouth. Yeah. Ficenec. Yeah. What nationality is Ficenec? Czech. Czech. No way. Cool.
Technically, I probably, or my family probably pronounces it wrong because in their language, the C is got a little character on it. It's pronounced like a TS. So technically it should be Ficenec.
Ficenec. That's even nicer.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm sure even though Simone is Dutch, she says it probably a lot prettier than we do. Yeah, no, I love it. I have one of my favorite YouTube videos is people from Italy. So my mother was Italian. And we say, mozzarella and gabagol and, manigot. And when they're walking through these Italian villages and they're like, how do you say mozzarella? And they'll go, mozzarella, or capicola. And they'll say, here's how in America says mozzarella. And they're like, they like make fun of us for how we botch their words. Anyway, let's get back to the point. Caring for our kids, shaping our future. How exciting. I'm always so proud to say that you're a pediatrician. When you walk away, I'll be like you're some like rock star famous person. Well, you are. What an important job. Like really, what an important role you play in our society. Let's learn about young you and what brought you to this place. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your parents, siblings, family life.
So I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia. So it's a university town. Virginia Tech is where that is. My parents actually still live in the same home that I grew up in. They moved 2 years before I was born. My dad's a professor, was a professor at Virginia Tech.
Wow.
Retired for many years now.
Professor of what?
Actually, this is the Hokie, Virginia Tech.
Oh,
I actually went to Virginia, so I am a Cavalier.
You're a Cavalier.
But my dad's a physicist, so he's a professor in physics.
Wow.
And I'm the youngest of four, so my mom always calls me the Blacksburg surprise because
were you
planning on three older siblings?
What are going 12, older?
12, 8, and 6 years older than me.
Okay. Boys, girls, still local?
Oldest is my oldest brother lives in Boston. He is also, he's in the pharmaceutical industry, I guess is his thing, but he's also a PhD physicist. So that's my oldest brother. And then I have, my older sister lives outside of Atlanta. She works in IT. She works for Bridge Tech. And then my closest in age and proximity sibling lives down in Lake Wiley.
Okay. Awesome.
She's a dental hygienist.
So you're all kind of, sort of, other than your second sister in the field. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. What, when your father went to school to be a physicist, what was his original goal? Because I'm assuming it wasn't to be a college professor. What was he?
I think it probably was.
It was. Interesting.
Or to do research, right? Or something. I've never asked what his original goal was.
Like to work for NASA or?
No, I think that's what he wanted to do, was to do research and to teach. And it's interesting because what I have asked him is, my grandparents, his mom and dad, owned a grocery store. His dad was a farmer in Nebraska who I think at most maybe had a 8th grade education, maybe. So I'm like, did your parents, like, as you kept going to more and more and more school, ever ask you, like, what's going on here? But his mom was a teacher, like a school teacher.
Yeah. Well, and how did you get that?
She knew.
How did you get that bug though? How did he get that bug for physics? And it could be a movie he watched. It could be that like a quick little blip of an interaction with somebody he admired in a diner. I mean, and look at what kind of ripple butterfly effect it's had.
He's an all around, like, if he was a three-sport athlete in high school, he played football in college where he went to school. So he was, I was just joking with my daughter earlier. I said, it's the funniest thing to me when Grandpa John calls other people nerds. Dad, you're a physicist. Yeah, well, I don't think he looks at himself.
He doesn't. He's a football player first.
Right.
Totally. Okay, so I'm assuming obviously he's still alive.
Yes.
And your mother's still alive. Very lucky. Very cool. Okay, so you said Virginia.
Yeah, I went to University of Virginia for undergrad. I actually went not knowing kind of what I wanted to do. I went in as an engineer. I actually have an engineering degree. I finished with that, even though at some point I then had to do my pre-med stuff because I decided during undergrad that I wanted to pursue a career in medicine. Yeah. Well, it's sort of like what I realized was I didn't want to do what I was doing. When I really got into the hardcore stuff of electrical engineering, I could do the work, but I was like, this is just not something
it's not enjoyable to you
myself doing for a career. And so I really had to do a lot of soul searching and start talking to some other people. And so I definitely wanted to do a career, do something in science, but realized I wanted to be around people. And then actually specifically around kids, because I had, as a younger person, I had lifeguarded and taught swim lessons and just really loved kind of working with kids and kind of always had an affinity. My high school friends would always make fun of me. We'd go to the beach and everybody we'd be in a pool somewhere at a hotel and everybody would be maybe drinking or something. And I'd be in the water and invariably I'd have like 20 kids around me and I'd be throwing them and playing with them. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. This is kind of,
it's like Dr. Doolittle, but with kids
this way. And that was even when I was younger. And so when I started thinking about what I wanted to do and thought about medicine as a possibility, it was really to do pediatrics. Once I got to med school, I try to have an open mind about maybe other career paths within medicine, but I just really
you decided pediatrics was the way.
And then when I did my pediatrics rotation in med school, it was really clicked.
It confirmed everything. So did it set you back at all undergrad or not so much?
No, I was able to kind of power through and
get through in 4 years.
Just a number of classes. So because I was in the engineering school, I'd already taken, way more math, way more physics, already my chemistry than the pre-meds had. So all I had to do was take organic chemistry, take some biology. I was behind a little bit in terms of like the testing. You have to take your MCAT during your third year of undergrad. And at that point, I'd only had a semester of organic chemistry and a semester of biology, but I still had to take the test based on all of that. So I had to do a lot of studying,
on
my own and learning material that I hadn't been exposed to yet.
And it wasn't now where there was so much technology at your fingertips. I mean, back then the computers were just coming and the internet was just coming. Where did you go to grad school also? Where did you go to grad school?
I went to med school at University of Virginia also. That's okay. I went to medical school there as well.
Okay.
I got in there, which was, my first choice. And then, and then more training after that. So once you finish med school, then it's on to residency. Where you do your specific training, for me, in pediatrics.
I'm going to ask you to hit pause.
Yep.
We are staying on time this episode, guys. Okay. So listen, we'll catch up with you in just a couple. Second segment, episode 30 of The Good Soul. Don't go away. This segment of The Good Soul is brought to you by Aaron Ficenec, certified luxury home specialist with Ivester Jackson Christie's International Real Estate. Aaron serves all levels of the greater Lake Norman region real estate market, and whether buying or selling, she is very much the lady who will deliver like no other. Many of us at Good Soul are also really happy clients. Aaron can be reached at 704-728-5657 or reach out to me and I'll get you guys connected. Thank you, Aaron Ficenec, and thank you guys for tuning in and supporting The Good Soul. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Good Soul. We're on episode 30, and we are talking shaping our future, caring for our kids. We are with Dr. Mike Ficenec. He is a doctor in pediatric medicine. So I want to rewind a little bit because we kind of chat between the segments, and we started talking a little bit about how he changed his career trajectory while in his undergrad program. And I want to kind of speak to that because a lot of the viewers and listeners are women who have kids going into to college, and they are kind of reinventing themselves. And, as I said to Mike and Manny, if you have a law degree and you decide you want to open a flower shop, it can be a head trip because you invested all this money and time. And at that juncture, your parents, right? You're scared. Am I doing the right thing? So tell us a little bit about that. What year were you in? And
well, it's my second year of undergrad, and like I said, first year or so, it's mostly just kind of sciences, right? I love science and math, and I'm good at it, right? So easy. But then I started getting into the actual work of things, and just didn't connect with me. Like I could do it. I had to work really hard at it to get it, where maybe some of the other students, it seemed to come easier. I realized when I was in some of these classes doing electric circuits, like these people liked doing this. And I was like, okay.
Was there a moment? Do you have a moment where you're like, we were building a radio and I looked over and
it was just in the labs, and they would collaborate, and I was always I always worked alone too. And I think a lot of engineers would kind of work together, and I think there's a lot more collaborative learning today in school anyway. Back then it was not as much of that, but still people would work in groups. But I always felt like I needed to understand it for myself. And if I worked in a group, I might be relying on somebody else, and I needed to fully immerse myself in it. That's just a quirk of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they seemed to enjoy it. They seemed to enjoy what they were doing, and I didn't. And so I went home for spring break during that spring of my second year in college, and I didn't want to go back I didn't want to go back to school and keep going because I just was like,
back, boy.
My mom.
Well, they have skin in the game.
My mom said,
I
yes,
mean,
you are.
Yeah,
you're going back, and basically, and just they were supportive, but they were like, that's not an option to not go back. And but hey, you probably need to talk to some people. And one of my roommates was pre-med, so I talked to him, and I started thinking about, what it was that I really wanted to maybe do with my life, because I hadn't thought about it. I just was kind of going through, okay, I'm good at this. I'll keep doing that, rather than what I want to do.
Yeah.
So,
but how exciting for your parents. It's like you want to be either an engineer, let's just say, or a doctor, a physician. It's like, God, do I get the Louis Vuitton or the Gucci? Like your poor parents. Like it's not like, should I don't know what, or I don't know what. That's something they're not proud of, which, all jobs are honorable. So I'm not discrediting. I'm just saying
but still,
yeah,
but still it's like, and everybody is different, but it's like giving that advice to, either whether it be my own kids or, because I have the privilege of being involved with children in my job and can counsel them sometimes too. You don't have to know, right? But my thing is that you have to try, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that. So, but go all in, right? If you think you want to do something, or go into it, but then experience it and see if that's what maybe you're meant to do. So, I was glad that I guess I did do what I did, and I tried to fully experience it and understand it and grasp it. And I realized, well, this isn't for me. And
well, these are big decisions.
I could pivot, right? And luckily for me, I could pivot, and it didn't take, as I mentioned before, I didn't have to take extra years or do whatever. And I had to pick up summer school classes, and as an engineer, I was already taking 18 to 20 credit hours.
So I might have
taken more. Yeah,
you did summer school.
I was taking.
Yeah, my Molly had to do the same
massive
thing.
Volumes of classes, but so I had to work hard.
It's worth it.
But then once I got into it, was like this, almost like this joy when I was doing my pre-med classes, and the other 1 year behind me, because they were mostly second year students. I was a third year student in like organic chemistry. Like I was in there like, whoa, what is wrong with you? And I was like, this is awesome.
How do you not? Yeah.
This is so hard. I was like, you want to take a hard class? And I'd mentioned, I was like, you go back and you take just electric circuits class, and you tell me how hard organic chemistry was. But that was hard for me. Everybody,
easy for somebody else.
Exactly. And it was probably easy for me. And I was like, but it was joyful, because then I saw I think for the first time in my life, saw a path. Okay, well, I'm doing these things.
Yeah.
Obviously, organic chemistry doesn't necessarily directly relate to medicine, but I'm doing these things to get to this next step, to do something that I can see myself really enjoying and being fulfilled by.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it's such a huge investment. I mean, excuse me, switching your major. I mean, you do have there's a lot at stake. It's almost like a do or die. Like, so that must have been scary to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
But
not in a way, not really, right? It's like when you make that, when something is right,
You make that final.
You just knew.
It should feel right?
Yeah, you just knew.
Yeah.
You just knew.
Yeah.
Okay, so in school, you decide you want to become a pediatrician. Are there certain like specialties that you could have got into, or did you decide you wanted to do general practice?
You have that sort of opportunity all along the way. So once you go into like your residency training, right, that's a standard 3 years of general pediatrics residency training.
Is that an office or in a hospital?
No, that's all. I mean, some of both. Mostly hospital-based stuff. You do some office-based things, and if you are really kind of eyeing primary care, so what I do is primary care pediatrics, so primary care general pediatrics. Like I had the opportunity to work in a community office. I actually did it 2 days a week. So I worked in the same office for 2 years with the same pediatrician as my mentor. And I would see patients and I would report to him, but, I started to have, some more experience that way. But most of it is, working in the neonatal intensive care unit and the ICU and the emergency room and on subspecialty rotations like endocrinology, because a lot of pediatricians even don't decide to just do general pediatrics. They then go on to do subspecialty. So they might become pediatric cardiologists or pediatric pulmonologists.
Did you ever consider any of that?
I briefly, I think during my second year, considered doing NICU because I just, so neonatal intensive care, so the teeny tiny babies. I liked it. But it was, once I got really into it, I decided that wasn't. So I wanted a more sort of holistic experience with my patients rather than just one specific.
Well, you become, more than their family. Yeah. We have a NICU nurse at the studio. Her name is Debbie Thompson. And if you saw her, you'd probably recognize her. Do you know who I'm talking about, Debbie?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I want to introduce you. And she's a special lady. It's really like you.
That is, because you deal with very sick,
sensitive, babies, heartbroken humans.
And when you're in the NICU, those, you do lose, you lose patients, right? Because not all those babies,
they're so vulnerable. Yeah. They're very. Okay. So, in your current practice, how did you end up in Mooresville? How did you end up, let's start there. How did you end up here?
Well, so I finished my residency. I actually did a chief resident year, which is, I was elected to do that. So I was actually kind of a faculty member at my residency program at Emory University in Atlanta. That's where I did that. Okay. After that, I actually moved back to Charlottesville, Virginia, where the University of Virginia is, and was in private practice there for 3 years. And
so you had your own practice?
No, well, it was a group practice. When I say private practice,
not owned by Novant, not owned by,
they were actually just owned by the partners owned it. It was a partnership. I was on a partnership track there. And so I was there for almost 3 years, and then that just wasn't the right environment or, work setting, I think, long term. And so I started looking a little bit and had some connections in Charlotte and made a connection and had an interview or two, and then ended up in practice in Huntersville.
Okay.
At that point.
And are you still there to this day? Or?
So I am in practice in Huntersville with a different group now, but I was with, so I initially joined a group practice that was was affiliated with Atrium. It was Carolina Self Care back then. I was with that practice. It was 9 or 10 docs. That practice for 13 years. And then in 2018 joined Novant Health and was for for reasons of not signing non-compete clauses and doctor's contracts, I was in practice in Mooresville for a little over a year. Because you have to practice outside of your
certain radius.
Right. So I was in Mooresville for a year, but then I actually had an opportunity to go back to Huntersville because that's where my patient base and population and most of my families were in the Huntersville, Davidson, Cornelius. And I had a lot of families that followed me up to Mooresville for that year and then followed me back down to Huntersville, but some that didn't, but then some that I reconnected with. And once I got back there.
For your quality of life, you weren't necessarily happier being closer to home or anything like that. You didn't mind.
I loved being closer to home, but ultimately when you go to work, you have to work in a certain, you have to work in your work environment. And if that's not, the right fit maybe, then
Well, and you had, like you said, your patients, and you become an extended member of their family.
Yeah. So when I had that opportunity, and the practice now, there's just two other docs. We do have a physician's assistant who's joined us recently, but it's small. It's under Novant, but it's a very small group, and we function like it's interesting. We function like our own practice,
like a private practice. I was just going to ask you. Well, that feels like Dr. Dohany's office, our doctor.
Okay.
I feel like he's the boss. He's like, no, they work under. Yeah. All right, guys, this is a great place to hit pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about some questions I think everybody has for a man with these brains. Vaccines and mental health and all kinds of stuff surrounding that. And it's, to me, not so scary. And it's people like Dr. Mike that make me feel that way. So don't go away. Lots of great questions to be answered here on The Good Soul, episode 30. This segment of The Good Soul is brought to you by Aaron Ficenec, certified luxury home specialist with Ivester Jackson, Christie's International Real Estate. Aaron serves all levels of the greater Lake Norman area real estate market, and whether buying or selling, she is very much someone I want in my corner. Aaron prioritizes building strong client relationships based on trust and authenticity. Manny and I should know, having purchased our land through her. She can be reached at 704-728-5657 or reach out to me and I'll get you guys connected. Thank you, Aaron Ficenec, and thank you guys for tuning in and supporting The Good Soul. Oh, how we love that. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Good Soul. I can't believe we're on episode 30 and I no longer have a frog in my throat. Thank you, God. We're talking with Dr. Mike Ficenec. He is a pediatrician who works out of Huntersville. And what's the name of the practice that you work?
It's the mouthful. It's Pediatrics Lake Norman Huntersville.
I guess
technically it's Novant Health Pediatrics Lake Norman Huntersville.
All right, but we can remember.
Yes.
They're all words that we know, though.
Yes,
so,
yes.
But as I say in every episode, if you ever want to contact, hopefully you can just reach out to me and I'll connect you guys. So let's talk first. Let's talk a little bit about vaccines, because I think probably my youngest is 20. Molly's 23. Sorry, look at her. Like, how old is Molly? Molly's 23. And I feel like just around that age, and I guess the coming of the internet kind of, every once in a while I'd have a random friend online who would be kind of raging about vaccines and this, that, the other thing. I've always kind of followed my doctor's protocols, especially when it came to my Molly, to my baby, and went along with what I was told. Can we talk a little bit about the basics of vaccines, why people would question and why we shouldn't question?
Yeah. I mean, I can give a very long-winded explanation for this. No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, first of all, about vaccines, I think the important thing, really, if you kind of take a step back and look at, childhood vaccines in particular, it really is kind of one of the greatest, probably medical, whatever word.
Miracles.
Miracles, really. Because if you have to go back a while to think about it, but, the eradication of smallpox, essentially the eradication of polio. These are worldwide things, right? Most or all of these diseases that we vaccinate against. And I think this in part leads to the conversation about it. We don't see. So it's hard for a lot of people to fully appreciate what that looks like and if you talk to, I know one of my partners is originally from India, and she's like, you go to my country where, in places where these vaccines aren't as, readily available. We look at measles rates, measles, MMR vaccine, but measles rates worldwide, it still is, a significant illness that, injures and kills a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. But we don't, thankfully, mostly have to deal with that, right? Because of vaccines. So that's, as a starting place, that's, I have conversations about vaccines. If people have questions, I don't always start sort of holistically like that, but they are really important. For me, so I've been in practice now for 23 years. I think the only vaccine that came along while I've been in practice is the oral rotavirus vaccine, for example. And so just my experience of before that vaccine admitting, 2 or 3 patients to the hospital, sometimes to the ICU. And rotavirus is a gastrointestinal illness, so vomiting, diarrhea, but kids dehydrated enough to land in the hospital, some of them in the ICU. But I would, have to admit to hospitals that since that vaccine has been in place, basically that number has gone to 0. Now that's anecdotally, that's for me, but that's something I just don't see anymore. I had a partner at my previous practice who was a generation before me. And so one of the vaccines that came into place before I was in practice, but that wasn't in place when he first started practice, the Haemophilus influenza vaccine or HIB vaccine, he would admit, that for babies would cause meningitis and bloodstream infections. And he would admit patients to the hospital with meningitis that would sometimes patients he would lose, sometimes patients that would have permanent hearing loss. Mm-hmm. I have seen 0 cases of HIB meningitis. I've never encountered that illness. And so that's where, when there's a lot of questions about vaccines out there, that's, it's hard for people, understandably, right, to fully kind of appreciate that. And that's why in getting those vaccines, if most people are vaccinated, it then prevents not only those people, those patients, but if you look at, which I have to as a pediatrician and as a medical provider, look at health sort of more globally, it protects patients who can't get vaccinated, right? So if most people are vaccinated against certain illnesses, yes, they're protected, but then those illnesses don't spread. So some, child who can't get vaccinated, maybe they have cancer, maybe they're getting chemotherapy, maybe so therefore their vaccine status has waned, or again, the vaccines for other reasons. I've had 2 patients in my entire career who had significant enough vaccine reactions as young children that they stopped getting vaccines.
I was going to ask you that. Have you seen any evidence?
2. And, I don't know.
How many thousands of patients? Tens of thousands of patients.
Well, and tens of thousands of, I don't know how many have been vaccines given, because you go through all those series, but who had, again, significant enough, and they're fine. These are kids I still see.
Yeah, they're okay.
in my office, and they're fine.
But they just reacted.
They followed, and we weren't even sure, but it seemed to be directly correlated to getting those vaccines. And so they met with, not only just me, but I referred them specifically to like a pediatric immunologist, and they ran certain studies, and they said they just, they shouldn't get vaccines.
So where do you think that these, and I'm not one of these people, so I don't want you to think I'm asking you this to challenge. Where do you think that these fears and these frustrations, like I look at Jenny McCarthy, she has a son who's autistic, and correct. There's a good example. Let's just take that for example. Do you find there's a correlation
between vaccines and that,
and autisms or food allergies, or
with vaccines and autism specifically, and specifically MMR vaccine, because that was one that was
in question,
talked about. Yeah. So that I can tell you a very specific story about. If
I would love to know. Yeah. So, people need to hear this. So the story, they're just listening to Jenny McCarthy. Yeah.
So the story behind that, so there was a article that was published in 1998 in the British medical journal Lancet.
Heard of it.
Andrew Wakefield, if you've heard his name, was the lead was the lead investigator on this. And so that's where a link between vaccines, vaccines, specifically MMR and autism was proposed. Okay.
Proposed.
That's where it was put out in an article. So it was put out then. That study was, if you look at that study, it was 12 patients. The data never supported that.
Mm-hmm.
His group was being funded by a litigation group of families looking for a link between vaccines and developmental disabilities. So they put it in their paper. Subsequently, I mean, this story is pretty well known. So subsequently, I mean, every author except Wakefield rescinded. He's been stripped of his medical license, all this, because he's kind of a famous anti-vaxxer on the internet still to this day. But that's not the important part of it. Is there was never an association. They put it in that paper. They actually had secondary things, and but because of that, the original thought maybe is not totally off base, right? Because there's a time correlation. What do we give in early, between 12 and 15 months? MMR vaccine. When do you first start to see symptoms of autism, especially in severely affected kids? Around 15 months. It's actually around the same time. So there's
a lot of coincidences.
But that's sort of it's a true and unrelated. I've used the example of, I could say that then a child walking causes their autism because it happens at the same time. But that doesn't mean, so the original thought. Now, because of that, there has been a lot of studies looking at possibilities of links between MMR and other vaccines and autism and
food allergies. I've heard too.
Yeah, maybe that too. That story.
Not so much as autism
is pretty unclear. Yeah, food allergy. That's less clear. I mean, it's clear because again, there's a lot of data out there. I know this was years ago, but there was I think it was in Denmark. There was a population-based study looking at vaccinated and unvaccinated kids and their rates of autism. Turns out it was the rate of unvaccinated kids at a slightly higher, but not statistically significant rate of autism. I mean, there's, as an example of, but there's lots and lots of evidence. So there's basically a ton of evidence that shows that there's no correlation. And then this one study, which has been thoroughly
debunked, basically. Okay. All right. On that note, I'm going to ask you to hit pause because when we come back, we're going to finish this talk and we're going to get a little bit more into mental health in our children. So don't go away. We'll see you in the fourth segment on The Good Soul. This segment of The Good Soul is brought to you by Aaron Ficenec, certified luxury home specialist with Ivester Jackson, Christie's International Real Estate. Erin's not only an amazing agent, but she's also an amazing friend to me with a diverse mix of happy Lake Norman clients, each with their very own unique circumstance and challenge. She's a one-of-a-kind boss lady who I endorse wholeheartedly. Erin can be reached at 704-728-5657 or reach out to me and I'll get you guys connected. Thank you, Aaron Ficenec, for adding your magic to all of your real estate transactions, and thank you guys for tuning into and supporting the show. We are eternally grateful. Mwah. Big kisses. Welcome back, everybody. We are on The Good Soul. We are on episode 30. We are on decade 3. We're so excited about this. And I love the name, Shaping Our Future, Caring for Our Kids with Dr. Mike Ficenec. So we just talked a little bit about vaccines. We could probably make 35 episodes on this topic.
Yeah.
It's been somewhat controversial. I like having people on like Mike who can clear up any misinformation we might have been shared. He just said on the break, back in the 90s when Jenny McCarthy was on Oprah for about 3 months after that interview.
The conversation kind of that we were just having, I had on a daily basis with parents who were rightly so concerned, right? When you get information, and this day and age, it's even harder because, the internet constantly bombards people in a fair number of times where there's just information that's not accurate. And it's hard to go onto the internet and figure out what is accurate and what's not. Right. And so that's where it gets confusing, I think, for people and makes the conversation hard sometimes.
Well, let's just take Oprah, who I hold in a very high regard, is a trusted source. Would you
Correct.
say?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
I'm going to believe what Oprah's guests
Sure.
might, and maybe Jenny McCarthy. Yeah, but I think another thing that's cool too. I think a lot of the past, say, 5 years, a lot of things are teaching us to think for ourselves in certain ways too, and what works for ourselves. And I'm going to assume that that's the case with you, that you're dealing with so many different people, religions, creeds, thought philosophies, and I can do this, I can't eat that, and to be able to service all of those needs of all of your patients, that is an art, not a science. A lot of it gets moral, right?
That's
I mean, I would assume.
I always tell people too, whether it's the conversation about vaccines or other things, like my job is to look at, sort of health, from a population standpoint. Like I have to tell you what I would, what information, is, what accurate information is, what I would tell all of my patients. Your job is you only have to think about your child, right? You don't have to worry about everyone else's kids. So if you have a different approach or something, like, I respect that, right? I may disagree maybe with some of your reasoning or that kind of thing, but that's not, I can just give you information and then you get to do with that information what you want. Yeah. Obviously, if it's very dangerous,
if it's dangerous to the kids,
that's different. I'm not talking about that, but just general things. And most people, there's a lot of different ways to parent. There's a lot of different, and so you're having to be kind of nuanced with that as well. Yeah.
So let's allow that then to segue into the mental health topic, which also can become almost like a moral issue. And, children take on the problems of their parents and their grandparents. And, we have these, we all inherit these personality defects and insecurities and fears and so forth. Do you really think that over the past 5 years, have you seen a change in the status of the mental health of your patients?
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, I have just experienced more,
conversations.
Well, conversations and just, if I want to look at it from an office visit standpoint, I had a lot more office visits. Now, this may be twofold. I think one factor was COVID, because I think during COVID, I think with just what happened with kids and, being out of school and,
isolated,
and all the isolation and other things that were going on, I think that brought some more mental health, crises to the forefront with them, with, so in my adolescent patients, I have definitely had a lot more visits for, anxiety and depression and those kind of things than I had in the past. Now, part of that is because, I think one factor, at least for me, because I don't want to say it's hard to tease all these things out, but my patient population is aging too. So I have a greater percentage of my patients are adolescents than it used to be when I was early in practice. Right. So that's a little hard to say. But I think even notwithstanding that, there's just I had these conversations a lot more, and it will. You talk about the internet again, and just social media and all the things
around
we're
exposed to.
It's pretty toxic. In a lot of ways, it's pretty toxic for kids.
Well, I think too, a lot of times too. One of my favorite memes is George Washington saying, "Just because you read it on the internet doesn't mean it's true." Yeah. It's really easy for somebody who's well spoken and articulate to make something that's not true sound true, and it's again, that's something that you of all people are combating tremendously. What's the age? When do people start? What do you find the years that parents start coming in questioning their children's mental state?
I think, I start seeing, more in middle school, certainly, even late elementary school. I have had very young patients that parents come in with, and maybe the question is different when
my kid keeps banging his head against the wall or some odd behavior.
There's behavioral issues starting in toddlers that are maybe beyond what is typical for toddlers. And there's, all through even, grade school years, but certainly in, middle and then in high school, and get into those issues more of depression and anxiety and that, but it's sort of all through.
Right. All through. More girls than boys?
No, not
Same.
necessarily. Again, maybe my take is a little skewed because I have more male, boy, adolescent patients than
You do.
female. No, I mean, I have plenty of both, but
Not by design. It's just
because sometimes
coincidence.
when girls get a little, girls get to that age, they
Yeah.
don't want to keep seeing a boy
They want a female
boy
doctor.
doctor.
Sure.
And so they sometimes will see like my female partner when
Yeah.
they've been seeing me, but a lot of them I still see, and I've been sort of privileged enough. I know I can quickly think of several right off the top of my head of adolescent and, actually almost becoming young adult girls who I essentially am their mental health provider. Like I
love
have
that.
counseled them. I've got enough expertise now, and I've done some extra things where just in terms of medication management and those kind. And I had one tell me not long ago, she's like, do I have to see somebody else or can,
Yeah.
and her mom told me too, she said, she really will only talk to you and doesn't really want to get care from someone else. And I'm happy to do that. And obviously if there's a problem that was outside my scope, where I didn't feel like I could handle it, I would refer, but
you're very grounded.
I can manage a lot of patients.
The mental health stuff. Well, I'll just tell you, just knowing you as your friend, is that you are very grounded. You're very easy to talk to, and you're very good at kind of laying out a situation. And I could see where that totally like clicked and made perfect sense to me. Yeah. Okay. So, again, not being controversial here, but to medicate or not to medicate, is that something that
just depends? Like I like to have that, like to be very open. And my first choice, and this isn't just, for mental health, my first choice would be not to do medications, right? So it's like an infection, right? And I know sometimes parents don't like that, but if it's like, it's like, well, I don't think this, this condition warrants antibiotics, or I'm going to treat something that is, if I'm going to prescribe something, it's to treat something specific, whether that be an infection or, like I do see a lot of ADHD, right? And so,
that's a good one. I mean, that's a great example.
I'm comfortable with a lot of medications, but again, sometimes that's, not appropriate. I don't want to start there. And then some parents don't want to start there, even if I think, your child may really benefit from this, but, if you don't want to start there, here are some resources. Here are the things we can do through the school. We need to set up a 504 plan and let's see how things go. Right. Yeah. And then if things aren't going well and maybe we'll see some benefit from that, maybe we can start there and we can talk about the range of medications and potential side effects and all those things.
Well, we just had
21. I see kids at 21, Manny. So as long as you
we just had a situation where a family friend or a family friend of a friend, they lost their son to suicide about 3 weeks ago. And he was a lovely boy. He was just at beyond lovely. He was amazing. And I remember our family friend saying, and she's European, and she was like, too much medication. We need to talk. We need to talk to the kids. We need to talk to the kids. And I'm like, did this kid, and this is me, this is my blonde haired, not medical school trained person, thinking, are we medicating people or people taking medication, and it kind of numbs their fear of dying? And that's why that first line item of a side effect of most antidepressants is suicidal thoughts. Could that be the reason? Because you kind of makes you like comfortably numb, let's say, like, okay, I'm going to die.
That issue actually with medication, and actually specifically with that side effect, that actually is a little controversial because again, those medications are used in a patient population that is a much higher risk. Like suicide
so it's a skewed statistic.
Is a much higher risk. But there was some theory back, and I even remember learning about this in medical school, right? Where for depression, for example, if you start to treat depression and maybe you have suicidal thoughts, but maybe you're just so unmotivated for anything, you can't do anything. And there's some theory that, okay, once you start treating that depression, is there this window where you've got enough motivation? I think kind of what you're referring to. But even that is very questionable with medication. Now, but to your initial point, I stress this very much with my patients is it's never just medication. You have got to be in counseling, be in touch, And sometimes that's the first line. We don't even want to do any medication, even someone that's, has significant anxiety or depression. Let's start here. Let's get you talking to someone. Let's see if we can work through this. And maybe at some point, and I'll work with the counselors, and some point, hey, we've just kind of hit this barrier, and we really benefit from, maybe a medication that allows the therapy then to be more effective, because those studies are very clear that, in terms of treating adolescent depression and anxiety, it's both, therapy and medication is sort of the gold standard of the most effective treatment.
I hate to cut you off, but I'm telling you, Mike, I see you pretty much every day. I want you to come back because there are so many things we didn't talk about. The one thing I want to emphasize, and I'm sure you agree, if you or anybody that you know is having suicidal thoughts, please get the help you need immediately. A simple Google search, call me, anything you need to do, but please, there is so much help and so many resources out there. So on that note, Mike, I'm so sorry to cut you off. God, I feel like we just got started, but we'll definitely arrange to have you come back again, because I absolutely want to get more into mental health. And then I want to talk about the funny stuff too and the cool stuff. There is a lot of fun stuff to go over. Yeah. Well, cool. All right, guys. So thank you so much. This is episode 30. You can catch us on WSIC 105.9 Tuesdays, 4 to 5, and of course on all your favorite platforms. So we will see you next week on the Good Soul. Woo!